Thanks for joining us. It is Friday, November 4th. Live from Seoul, I'm Han Dan. Where could we start but President Park Geun-hye's second public apology in less than 2 weeks, 10 days after apologizing to the public for allowing her confidant to access her speeches. President Park offered another apology, this time saying she's willing to submit to an investigation as part of the larger inquiry into the abuse of power scandal centering around Choi Soon-sil if necessary. For more, let's connect to our presidential office correspondent, Song Ji-sun. Ji-sun, so I guess she did answer to some of the loudest calls from the public and the politicians.
You're right, Down. Just as she did with her last week's apology, President Park began her remarks with a bow to the public. Now, during her 9-minute message, which was longer than last week's 90-second apology, the president said she was deeply sorry and she expressed her apologies to the people for the pain she has caused for the recent series of scandals, which were related to her longtime confidant Choi Soon-sil, and said it is all her fault and responsibility. She said she is willing to fully cooperate with the prosecutor's investigation and is even willing to submit to an independent counsel investigation if necessary.
필요하다면 저 역시 검찰의 조사에 성실하게 임할 각오이며 특별 검사에 의한 수사까지도 수용하겠습니다.
If she does submit to such an investigation, she will become the first South Korean president to do so. The president also expressed her intent to carry out her duties as commander-in-chief. Citing the challenges facing the Korean economy and security, President Park said state affairs must be carried on and should not be stopped by controversy.
대통령의 임기는 유한하지만 대한민국은 영원히 계속되어야만 합니다. 더 큰 국정 혼란과 공백 상태를 막기 위해 진상 규명과 책임 추궁은 검찰에 맡기고 정부는 본연의 기능을 하루속히 회복해야만 합니다.
President Park added that the nation's growth momentum should not be stopped and the related policy drives must continue as well. The president also vowed greater communication with all sectors of society, from the parliament to religious circles and civic leaders, and vowed to hear their voices and demands. Now, the presidential office said that the president is arranging a meeting with political party leaders. At today's national address, the president did not indicate to what extent she would yield governing authority to the new prime minister, but the top office said that to have discussed it in details. Daeun.
Thank you, Ji-sun. One thing that's got the public even more upset is that Choi Soon-sil is the daughter of a famous cult leader, and President Park may have been involved. Through her apology, President Park made clear that that is not true. Connie Kim has more on that and her other remarks.
President Park Geun-hye has offered her deepest apology to the citizens of South Korea for a second time, following her first apology last week for the allegations and growing abusive power scandal surrounding her longtime confidant, Choi Soon-sil.
홀로 살면서 챙겨야 할 여러 개인사들을 도와줄 사람조차 마땅치 않아서 오랜 인연을 갖고 있었던 최순실 씨로부터 도움을 받게 되었고 왕래하게 되었습니다. 제가 가장 힘들었던 시절에 곁을 지켜주었기 때문에 저 스스로 경계의 담장을 낮추었던 것이 사실입니다.
However, the president denied any rumors related to her possible involvement with a shamanistic cult or the obscure religious sect founded by Choi's father, Choi Tae-min.
제가 사이비 종교에 빠졌다거나 청와대에서 구술했다는 이야기까지 나오는데 이는 결코 사실이 아니라는 점을 분명히 말씀드립니다.
The president also apologized to government officials and companies that have helped her run the government. Choi Soon-sil is accused of using her connections to the president to force conglomerates to make massive donations to 2 government-linked foundations.
저와 함께 헌신적으로 뛰어주셨던 정부의 공직자들과 현장의 많은 분들 그리고 선의의 도움을 주셨던 기업인 여러분께도 큰 실망을 드려 송구스럽게 생각합니다.
It is now up to the public to decide whether or not to accept President Park's apology. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Let's now cross over to our parliamentary correspondent Kim Young-gil for the reaction from the National Assembly to President Park's address. Young-gil, what's the word from the rival parties?
Hello, Dan. Well, the ruling Saenuri party said the president's remarks were sincere and demonstrated her willingness to fully cooperate in the ongoing investigations into the Chaesunji scandal. The minor opposition People's Party also welcomed the president's remarks. However, the main opposition Democratic Party of Korea expressed its disappointment with the president's remarks, saying they were not much different from the president's first apology and how it didn't sufficiently address the seriousness of the current situation. The opposition bloc had been calling on President Park Geun-hye to agree with their demand for an independent counsel investigation for the case, and in her remarks today, she agreed. They also called on her to explain why she didn't seem to have enough time to meet with her presidential aides, because she was making time in her schedule to meet with the heads of conglomerates suspected of involvement with two government-linked foundations Che was said to have controlled. The opposition parties also urged the president to reconsider her nominee for prime minister so that a neutral cabinet can be formed, and said they would like a meeting with her in person to discuss it. They have already been critical of her choice of Kim Byung-jun, a former policy advisor to the late Liberal President Roh Moo-hyun. Meanwhile, the ruling Saenuri Party plans to hold a general meeting of its lawmakers this afternoon to decide the fate of the party's leadership. The members of the party's non-pro-Park faction wants party leader Lee Jong-yeon to step down, but Lee has refused to quit, saying that won't resolve the current crisis. 다음.
Thank you, Myung-gil, for that. Keep us posted throughout the day. The probe into the Chaesunji case is gathering pace. Our Lee Min-young reports on the latest developments.
Seoul Central District Court issued an arrest warrant for Choi Soon-sil, the woman at the center of the affair, late Thursday night. Her arrest comes 4 days after she first appeared for questioning by prosecutors. She was booked on 2 criminal charges, attempted fraud and being a joint principal offender with top presidential aide An Jong-bum in a crime of abuse of official authority. During the court hearing, there was an intense back and forth over whether Choi was an accomplice to An in the crime of abusing official authority. But the court accepted the prosecution's logic that Choi conspired with An to pressure conglomerates into making massive donations to 2 government-linked foundations and then funneling funds into a paper company for her own benefit. An arrest warrant is likely to be requested for An, the former presidential secretary for policy coordination, on Friday, before the 48-hour emergency detention period runs out. Prosecutors placed An under detention without a warrant on Wednesday night to prevent a destruction of evidence. An is suspected of coercing local corporations into donating huge amounts of money to 2 foundations that Choi Soon-sil is believed to have established and controlled. The primary focus of the investigation into An will be to determine whether President Park also played a role in setting up or running the 2 foundations. Prosecutors say the investigation into the case will continue for another 20 days, and they will move to charge Choi with other criminal offenses, including embezzlement, accessing presidential documents without clearance, and garnering preferential treatment for a daughter during her time at Ewha Women's University. Meanwhile, the prosecution also arrested Chung Woo-sung, another former presidential personal secretary, late Thursday night for leaking state secrets. Lee Min-young, Arirang News.
That does it for now. I'll be back with more headlines at 4 p.m. Korea time. Stay with us.